Peter, hello, great to see you. So tell me a bit about your journey with the three principles, because I know you were a head teacher. So how did you come across it?
Well, I've always been interested in different ways of looking at the human condition, really, and I think working in schools for over 40 years, 30 plus of those as head teacher, I've worked with obviously lots of people, little people and all the grown-ups that work in schools. So in terms of the introduction for the principles, it was really through Jenny Kennard, who's my younger daughter, and Jenny had always been very, very shy. Extremely shy, so much so that she'd sort of step across the road rather than talk to people that she knew. And then she went on a day's training and changed dramatically. And I was very shocked by this and very concerned. I thought it had to be drugs or it had to be a cult or something of that nature, you know. But she stayed changed, and I was very resistant to hearing really about this, and she'd say to me, "Oh, there's this chap called Sydney Banks that's coming to talk in London. Do you want to come and go?" And I'm going, "No, no, no, I don't want to do that." And then, bit by bit, just as a sort of drip, drip, drip technique, she'd say, "Oh, do you want to come to this?" And I'd go, "No, no, 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 no." And then finally, I went to something that Jack Pransky was doing, just an evening talk, and I heard something there. Really, I came away feeling really light. It was a feeling more than any words. I guess if there were any words that I do remember from that, it was, "Oh, you don't have to believe every thought you have." Because I thought, oh my goodness, that is just amazing. Because I'd always, anything that came up, I took it for granted that was real and that it was, and true.
Yeah.
And so it was extraordinary, really. And then I was able to go on a weekend that, following that really rapidly, 2 or 3 days later, that Jack did. And then Rudy's sister, Rudy Kennard, my daughter's husband, his sister set up a community interest company called Free Mind, and that was funded through the lottery. And the deal was that the training that we had was free, but then we took it out into our communities. And of course I'd got a ready-made community of the children, of the staff, of the parents in school. And so over a 3-year period we got to meet a lot of the teachers of this understanding, and were able to go out and start practicing it in our communities. So that's the beginnings, really.
So how did you share it? You share it within your school community. What kinds of different ways?
Well, it comes up. It's come up in a variety of different ways. Sometimes it's the children that are always struggling, you know, and there's always some of those in school, and particularly some of the boys, and they might be struggling with being able to just get along with other people and fall foul of the system in school. And so, you know, talking to them one-to-one about how we create our experience, I wouldn't be saying it in those words necessarily, but how we create our experience moment to moment, and how it absolutely looks like it's him over there that's upset me because he's taken my football or he's said something to me or called me a name, but that absolutely it's never that. It's always the experience is generated through thought. Children pick that up really quickly, and I think, you know, unlike adults that will turn around and say, "Oh, that's a bit like CBT," or "That's a bit like NLP," or and so on and so on, they just go, oh, that's how it works. Oh, right, okay, and then go away and get on with their lives. So there'll be one-to-one stuff. There'll be through assemblies. So, you know, if I've got 300 or 400 children present, we'll have assemblies around this thing called thought and the changeability, the changing nature of it. I loved it when Jenny and Rudy were in Nepal and with Dave, and they were talking about the thoughts being a bit like clouds and the sort of ever-changing nature of clouds. So, so sometimes, you know, we're talking it in that way. Then I'll do specific trainings. So Jenny and I have been in, my sister-in-law Sue and I've been in, Rudy and I've been in, doing work with parents and with staff, because, you know, often you can talk in a one-to-one situation and the child will go away with things that are changed in their head. It's very helpful if everybody else knows that. Even with the traditional sort of role of when it was a sort of counselling role, I would always think that, you know, you could work with the child. They would have a changed view of themselves maybe and of the world, but then they go to their parents and it's still the same one, and go to their teachers and it's still the same one. So it's not being reinforced for them. So it's a bit like having a three-legged stool. You know, if you've got all those key legs in place, then the stool's going to stand up. So yeah, so that's pretty much how I've been doing it. And then I've been seeing quite a few children, teenagers, one-to-ones, and then Sue and I have run quite a lot of just trainings for the general public. I've helped with Jenny and Rudy on their retreats and done offered one-to-ones in the break times and things like that. Any opportunity to share it, to be honest.
So you've gone from being quite resistant to being a facilitator, a trainer, someone who is comfortable sharing it. That sounds like a bit of a journey. Was it a journey to get to where you are now?
It's yes and no, really. It's yes and no, because when I went to Jack's first evening, something changed to me, really. I heard something. I woke up to something. I read Jack's book within 2 or 3 days about somebody should have told us, and the parenting from the heart, and it felt like coming home. And that's the expression I would have used then. I realise now I was always home, but it felt like coming home. So that was part of, you know, that was part of it. I guess it's been a journey in the sense that over time, and I think this is going to carry on being a journey about how I actually talk about it. So I've got stuff, for example, on my website at the moment, me talking about it, and I talk about it differently now. But I guess the actual sort of waking up to the potential for this, that thing where, I mean, Sydney Banks talked about freedom for any of us is literally just one thought away. Some while ago that hit me, and it hit me very hard in the sense that it's almost like a rebirth. So that all that story that I told myself about myself and about others that had said this or that or the other about me, there's the potential for being new and to not have any of that backstory. And that to me seems, you know, absolutely amazing, and it's wonderful for any of us. So when I've had people working with me saying, well, the thing is, I'm a warrior, my mum was a warrior, her mum was a warrior, that's it, that's my life. You know, life doesn't have to be like that, and there's the opportunity, there's the potential for people to not have to see it like that. There was a young girl, 13-year-old I was working with recently, and one of her things amongst a number of stuff that she absolutely wouldn't ever do was go in lifts. And we talked a bit about the principles and how life works and so on. And at Easter she went away skiing, and she came back and saw me after the visit. And she said, I've got something to tell you, I've got something to tell you. I said, what's that? So she said, well, I went in a lift, and I went in it 9 times. I didn't like it, but I went in it. And you know, the interesting thing is that we then didn't talk about lifts, but we talked about the possibility that up to that point, absolutely, she was adamant she was never going to do that. And yet her thoughts had changed. And so that potential for any of us to change our minds is just fantastic, I think.
And how has that shown up for you then in that freedom that you maybe have experienced around thought? And being only one thought away from freedom.
From freedom, yeah. Well, I dodge in and out, really. I sometimes feel very free and in the flow of life, and, you know, throw anything at me you like life, and I'm fine. And there's other times I completely forget where my experience is coming from, and it so looks like it's that particular thing that's got knotted up in my head. So that it does change, but I had the opportunity to go out and work with Dickon Bettinger and Keith Blevins in Lacona, and up to that point I'd been teaching this for quite a while, but it was there I had this massive insight, and massive for me, it's the obvious, but then that's what insights are, isn't it really, where I'd realised that I'd seen this as the more I understood it, the more grounded I became, the deeper I saw it, the happier I was going to be. As if that was the goal. The goal was about happiness, and it was only while I was there that it became clear to me. Actually, it's not about that. It's about an acceptance. That was the big word that came up for me, and trust. So accepting that life is going to carry on just unfolding, really, and trusting that there is a system, these three principles, that are always working. And then seeing that the being in the flow of life and feeling sort of happier with things was the byproduct of all that. That was very, very helpful to me. So what I would say is, looking back, is that on the surface I always seemed a very calm person. Absolutely I wasn't beneath the surface. You know, part of the job was that I always needed to be the same day after day as the leader in a place. But sometimes I'd pay a very high price for that. You know, I'd get headaches, or get, you know, feel upset stomachs, and, you know, all those sorts of things. And I think it was my body trying to say, look, you know, you need to get more authentic with yourself. And but it's made a massive difference to me over the 8 or 9 years now that I've been with this.
And I think that's kind of interesting, isn't it? That sort of oh, hello doggies, saying hello. I think that's really interesting, isn't it? That what you say about the goal is not about happiness. Because isn't that, you know, if someone comes to see you for whatever reason, I'm sure that that is their goal, is to become more happy. So I'm kind of curious about how you explain that to people.
Well, to pinch a metaphor, and I've forgotten who it's come from now, but the ups and downs of life is almost like the inhale and the exhale in our breathing. And to say all you want is happiness in your life is a bit like saying, well, actually, I'm really hooked on the inhale. In fact, I want more of that. In fact, I think I only want that. And actually, as we know, there's an inevitability at some point we're going to have to exhale. And so that rhythm of life, that flow of life, that's the ebbs and flows, is just an inevitable part of life. And this understanding is all it is a description of how we work as human beings. And in that understanding of how we work, I think that's where we then get less on our minds. We get less on our minds because we know there is a system that's working for us all the time. Having less on our minds, it means we're then it's more accessible to this new thought that keeps flowing through us, but that often we don't hear because we've got so many little things that we're trying to work out and pulling us this way and that way within our heads that we don't hear some of the fresh thought that comes. So in a way, I guess what I'm saying to people is that a description of what the system is, when you've got that, the likelihood is that there's going to be times when you have less on your mind. When you've got less on your mind, you're going to be more open to new stuff that comes along. The stuff that then bugs you or that you've been troubled by is either going to just disappear, as I found with lots of things, or I'm going to find solutions to those things. The interesting thing is that in the past I would have been searching around in thoughts that I already had. So, you know, I imagine it like a massive thought picnic, and if we have 100,000 or so thoughts every day, in my life I've had quite a few, you know, and so it's almost like stumbling around and picking this up and no, that's not the answer I want, no, that's not the answer I want, and that isn't the place. You know, the place is in fresh thought. And so helping people to become more curious in the human condition as us as thinkers, really, and the nature of thought, rather than the content of thought. Because many of the talking therapies, some of which I've been involved with and learnt about and delivered, is about trying to manipulate thought that's already been come into being. So that's sort of the formless nature of the energy that's behind life, as that's coming through us and comes into thought, and understanding a bit more about that. And it's a difficult one, it's a tricky one, it's a slippery one, really, because sometimes I feel I've got quite a good hold on that, and there's other times I think, well, I've got no idea, I don't know how I'd explain that to anyone. And the trouble is, the moment that you start to explain it, you're putting it into the world of form, and when it's in the world of form, that's what it is. So I don't know really whether I've answered that question, but...
Well, I kind of think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because part of what I'm beginning to get a sense of is that part of the challenge of this work is describing the three principles, Because if you're talking about the formless, then the only way you can describe it is through words, which is then the form.
Yep.
So I don't know, what is your understanding of the formless? How might you describe that to me in this moment?
Good question. I guess it's the sense, the sense I have is something that is about an energy that, you know, one way of describing it is that where I've seen, and unfortunately I have seen one or two people that have died, and for instance I found my dad dead in bed. He'd had an aneurysm and died. Great for him because he was there one minute and gone the next. But he was my dad as a body, but he wasn't my dad anymore. That the energy that had made him him had gone and had left him, and so there is something that's about an energy that's behind us all, that drives us, that makes us the human part of our being. There we are, busy being beings, but the human part of that is that life energy that's behind everything that drives us. And within that, you know, there's an infinite wisdom, an infinite possibility for new thought, which to me then is hugely hopeful, because anything that I've been stuck with, I can think, well, I'm stuck now, but actually I don't have to stay stuck. And that sense of the changeability, the things and the possibilities really that life can generate, all of that, it's saying all of that to me. I mean, in terms of sort of the understanding, often with children I say to them, do you know what? If we're thinking about learning to ride a bike, we can talk about balance, and we can talk about forces, and we can talk about when the forces are in line with one another, then we've got the balance and everything. But actually, the learning to ride a bike, you need to get on it and fall off probably quite a few times, and then at some point there'll be that magic moment where there is balance. And this understanding, I think, is an experiential sort of understanding that you hear something about it, you go away and you do life really, or life does you, and you notice just stuff that maybe looks then a bit different. It looked to me a lot, most of my life, that it was other people that were causing me stress in life, or other things that were happening that were causing me stress in life. When I started to see where the true nature of my experience was coming from, it woke me up, and I thought, oh my goodness, it's not that. And then I forget it. That's the funny thing about it, because the way the world is set up and how it's reinforced, you know, he's made me upset, she's what have I done to upset you, you know, all those sorts of things we say, we reinforce that model and a paradigm and a view of the world that's actually the wrong paradigm. And so the potential for the whole world in hearing this is huge, I think, and it really, when Sid Banks, you know, talked about it, the possibility of it changing the world, it really has got that possibility, I think, because the more I've seen individuals wake up to it, individuals that sometimes have been really troubled, some of the children I've worked with have been really, really troubled. They've had all sorts of programs, all sorts of well-meaning things that people have done to try and intervene to help them manipulate thoughts that they were having. When they started to get more at home with their thoughts, when they started to realise where their thoughts were coming from, and therefore the thought-feeling connection, having that, you know, permanent feedback 24/7 on what's our thinking like. So there's one lad, he said to me straight away, he folded his arms, says, well, the thing is, I've got anger issues. That's it, really. I thump people. That's my default position. So once we started talking, and he realised that, you know, yeah, that is one possibility. You can just thump people, but there are other possibilities with that. It suddenly opened up, and it was dawning on him. You know, he could just take himself off. So within one session of talking, he was actually just taking himself off to like the other side of the playing field. And I'd said to the staff, look, just if he does that, he's not being naughty, but actually that's going to be one of his mechanisms of just letting his thoughts settle again. So we'll use all sorts of metaphors like the snow globe thing and shake that up, and children really like that because it's like shake it like mad and then put it down. And then I've seen children, as they put it down, they visibly sort of settle back into the chair as the snow is settling, so they settle too. And that's sort of quietening of the mind. And when things quieten down, then we're more available to hear the wisdom that's there for us.
So let's just finish up with this wisdom then. To
Yes.
tell me about the wisdom. What is that wisdom?
Well, wisdom, I think, is just thought. It's all thought. Everything is just thought. I mean, the world that we're in is thought-created world. We are creative thinkers. At times we think up things that really frighten us, and then we forget that we've made that up, which is really funny in a way. But I would say, that everything is thought. There are some thoughts that there is a sort of deep knowing within us that actually that's the thing. Yeah, that's what I need to do. And it might not be something big. It might be something like, I'm really grotty at the moment, and things are not going along so well. I just really need to sleep. And it's quite a compelling thought that says, yeah, that's what I need to do. And there's been plenty of other times in my life, even before I knew about the understanding, where, for example, I'd be stuck on something, I'd get exasperated, I'd give up, and then go away, and I'd be down the garden, or I'd be out for a walk, or driving the car, and suddenly it'd pop into my head, oh, that's what I want to do. That's what I need to do. That's the answer.